We are here to discuss the total economic impact. Now, when we talk about impact, we are not just talking about opinions backed up by some flashy numbers taken out of thin air. We are talking about some real hard coded figures backed up by some credible research. Now, Adobe in this case partnered with Forrester Consulting, which is one of the most respected name in the industry when it comes to independent market research to conduct this rigorous economic impact study. In fact, Forrester had to go through a series of interviews with stakeholders, clients, understanding their businesses, figuring out the trenches where learning is making an impact. And that really helped them come up with some quantifiable business values that organizations are driving from their learning initiative. Now, this involves things like cost optimization, financial modeling, ROI, productivity, risk mitigation, and several other factors that we will be discussing today. So what are the key takeaways of the session? Number one, definitely the numbers and the figures. You will take away some great customer stories, but most importantly, the opportunity to look at digital learning as a clear business growth driver that aligns with the business objectives. So a lot to cover in next 1 hour. So please sit tight, grab your coffee, and stay engaged as we are just getting started. And once again, for the recording, my name is Hitesh Bajaj. I'm head of solution consulting and solution engineering here at Adobe. And I'm joined by Justin Seeley, who is our learning evangelist at Adobe, and he will be taking us through those hard numbers, right? So let's get started. We're going to start with the agenda, a quick walkthrough as to what we are covering today. So we will be building the case for learning. We will be talking about the relevance of learning in today's world, and things are changing and evolving at a much faster pace today, and how learning is making a case for itself. We will be talking about that. We will take you through the need, capabilities, and benefit of the learning market, the innovations that are happening in here, how some of the dynamics have evolved over the period of time. And then the elephant in the room, which is the total economic impact, which will include the methodologies and the project approach, customer journeys, and the results, the real numbers that that Adobe and Forrester came out with. Now, if I need to talk about how learning matters in today's world, I think needless to say, it matters more than ever before. But this is a very generic statement, which I believe will stand true even 100 years down the line, because learning is one factor that complements the pace of innovation that we are living in. And this innovation pace is going to continue to grow, right? So the technical innovation that is happening today is a big factor around this. And we know the fact that this innovation, and with that note, I somehow lost the screen and I got it back. So this innovation help organizations to acquire new skills, make their workforce ready, and maybe rethink of how they conduct employee experience in their environment. Now, the whole relationship between employer and employee is driven by some of these fundamental factors of how they are keeping employees engaged, how they are thinking about keeping them motivated, and think that they are continue to grow in that organization. But this technical innovation also bring in the factors of uncertainty, and like I said, learning becomes a big complement there because it kind of satisfies the curiosity, adaptability, and the need for critical thinking. And like I said, the pace has continued to grow here. Last but not the least, when we talk about workforce retention, there are several studies out in the market that suggest that learning, growth, career mobility are the most important sticking factors when it comes to talking about workforce retention in any organization. Now, if we talk about some of the numbers, some research is suggested. The first one is from Forrester that says that 79% of global AI decision makers think that over the next 2 years, their whole planning around employment, their whole planning around workforce management is going to evolve, and have generative AI will have a huge impact on it. Where 67% of the global AI decision maker thinks that over the next 12 months, they see the increase in number of employees in their ecosystem. One is because, this whole demand of generative AI, which is still kind of, although increasing at a very rapid pace, but still early in its kind of adoption. People need employees to adapt to new skills and be ready for the skills of the future. And there's another study that happened by World Economic Forum with 1,000 organizations, which also spoke about that how by 2030 they see a potential growth in job gains in the ecosystem. And if you see the net number, it comes out to be positive. So the current study suggests that while these numbers are growing and they will be impact on how organizations look at employment within their ecosystem, learning is still a critical play there, as it is going to decide how people stay, evolve, and grow within the organization. Now, a very clear call out. I should have called it earlier. When we talk about learning, we are not just talking about employees here. This total economic impact is very diverse across different personas and functions that we operate in, which involves employees at the center, followed by the partner ecosystem, which is sometimes we call it extended enterprise. And last but not the least, in fact, very critical, is customer and the end user. There's a lot of emphasis going on how to keep customer engaged. We spoke about the employee retention, but customer retention is equally important, right? And we cannot run the show by looking at one aspect alone. We need to have a holistic view. When we talk about growth in the organization, we look at all the levers and get them activated. And this report and study is about all these different factors that Justin will talk about shortly. Another great study by Forrester. This is a current study in FY25, which talks about how increased access to learning and growth opportunities top the list of employers. So they conducted a study with largest of the large organizations to ask them what are the key actions their organization is taking to improve the employee experience. 42% of the audience, which is the largest percentage by question, said that they want to increase access to training, skill development, career mobility, which is another sticking factor, and monitoring and development opportunities in the learning ecosystem. So learning still remains the top priority for the employee experience. And when we talk about employee experience, we are not just talking about just learning management systems. We are giving a holistic view, which we will cover shortly. Now, to modernize your learning platform, there are certain areas which are not just checkboxes, these are must-haves. The first one is definitely how you can design, think, and deploy something which you can track and something that gives you very tangible outcomes and give you access to impact of learning on different parameters and KPIs in the organization. It has to be multi-stakeholder driven, like I said, not just employees, customers, and partners as well. Now, in these 6 pillars, if you ask me to pick the one which I would like to keep on the top, it's going to be personalization at scale. Personalization is a highly abused word in the learning ecosystem, but we all know the fact that the more personalized the environment is, the more it can cater to the need and requirement of the people, we will be in a better condition to get system adopted. And if it's getting highly adopted, we see the better results. How can we have a cognizant of cost and benefits, which is again the ROI factor that comes in the picture? Forward thinking, being ready for the future, being agentic in design. And with that, I mean, can you make learning interactive? Can you make learning so that it can be taken to the learners where they are in their web experience, rather than expecting learners to come to learning? And whenever that happens, if there are barriers, I mean, that leads to a higher dropout rate. And last but not the least, focus on the real business outcomes, not just learning completions or how many enrollments and registrations are happening. These are things of the past. We are talking about how learning is really making an impact to the day-to-day activities, to the KPIs, to the job functions, to the role that people are playing in the organization. Now, if you look at learning platform as a market. It is no longer a focused market around learning management systems, which was the case a decade back. But there have been innovation in last 10 years that when we talk about learning platform, it is an amalgamation of learning management system, learning experience platform, skill development platform, and digital adoption platform. Now, as an organization, I will say that you are at a good spot if you have all these four pillars within the organization, but that good spot become better when these different platforms are integrated. They are talking to each other, providing a more frictionless experience, embedded experience to your end users. But that better state become best when there are limited integration touch points. This whole ecosystem is driven by a single tech stack or a tech stack that has very limited vendors, kind of deeply integrated with each other, so that there is lesser cost of management, lesser cost of maintenance, and it is leading to higher savings because of the consolidation of all four factors by one, two, or maximum three players. So that's a very important factor. Last but not the least, if we talk about the pain points that we have observed in this study that Adobe has been able to solve, which Forrester called out, first one is how we can deal with poor user experience across learners, administrators, and instructors. Now, you will notice that the moment we use the word experience, we typically tie it with the learner experience, which I think is not a complete picture. When we say experience, it has to tie with the administrators, instructors, managers, and other roles in the ecosystem. How can we make that experience seamless, automated? How can we make sure we have limited touch points? Complex to complex workflows can manage very effectively and easily in the platform is one of the pain point that Adobe tries to solve. Second is how the basic functions that lack flexibility, advanced reporting capabilities. When we say basic functions, we are talking about any feature or function that becomes a critical component in a complete workflow. How can that be molded in a way that it becomes more easily adopted to your need and requirements? At the same time, the reporting capabilities, how they can drive us some actionable insight, which can make us more proactive rather than reactive to take some measures. I remember that sometime back when we talk about reporting, people used to take annual analysis, study it, and then make strategy for the next financial year. Now, that annual analysis has now come down to quarterly and monthly analysis because the reporting is giving you real-time information as to what is working, what is not, is it aligning with the business objectives or not, and you are taking the actions accordingly. Now, efficiency in the course management. I was talking to a large consulting organization, and when I asked them, like, what is their biggest pain point in their learning ecosystem, and they said that it is content management. Because of the size of the organization, sometimes the content is so dispersed and so scattered across different application tools and functions that people just don't know what all content exists today. And they are spending unnecessary time in recreating wheels, recreating content that maybe already exists. So a lot of productivity goes into doing same work repeatedly because of lack of clear and clean content management. So having a centralized ecosystem that manages content across the organization for employees, for customers, for partners kind of takes care of that problem. And last but not the least, fragmented learning experience. When I say fragmented, I'm talking about disjoint experience, which has barriers, which has factors that lead to highest dropout rate. When we say dropout, it is a very commonly used term in the social sphere, like when do people drop out in a social application, right? Similarly, if the experience require a lot of clicks, a lot of redirections, re-authentications, change in look and feel of the experience, it psychologically lead to a higher dropout rate. How can we make it frictionless in nature is what Adobe tries to solve. Now, apart from the pain point and the cost saving, the other biggest factor is how can we save significantly by decommissioning legacy systems and getting onto one unified learning ecosystem or a platform. And in the study, it has led to over $500,000 worth of saving over the 3-year time frame, for some of our clients, just by decommissioning some legacy system which were not adding a lot of value. So, with that note, it's time to dig a little deep into the real numbers of total economic impact. And for that, I would like to call my friend Justin to take us through what this study is all about and what numbers we drive out of it.
All right.
Over to you, Justin.
Sounds good. Thank you, Hitesh. Thanks, everybody. Again, chat's open. So if you have questions along the way, please feel free to use the chat pod. We'll be happy to answer those if we can. And then at the end, we have dedicated Q&A. So please be sure to put questions in there. I want to start off by grounding ourselves in the methodology that Forrester used for this study. So they apply what they call the Total Economic Framework, or TEI, as you'll hear us call it throughout this presentation. It's a proven, repeatable model that they've used for years to evaluate technology investments across many different industries. The TEI framework looks at 4 basic dimensions. So benefits, measurable gains such as productivity improvements, revenue growth, cost savings, all those things. Costs, the investments required, including licensing, deployment, and ongoing maintenance. Flexibility, which is the added value organizations realize as they expand adoption or apply the technology to new use cases. And then finally, risk, adjusting all of those numbers to account for uncertainty, ensuring the final results are conservative and credible. So the goal here is to give decision makers a transparent way to understand not just the upside, but the complete picture of the investment that they are making in a product. And that's what they try to do here with Adobe Learning Manager as well. So if we take a look at now, excuse me, the project approach, it's pretty simple. Forrester started out with due diligence, gathering background information on Adobe Learning Manager and the broader learning market. Next, they conducted interviews with 5 organizations using the platform spanning hospitality, manufacturing, healthcare, technology services, and financial services. You'll get a bigger breakdown of this in just a few minutes. So if all that kind of seems like, oh, that's a lot, don't worry, we're gonna dive deeper into that in just a second. From those insights, Forrester then creates what's called a composite organization, a model company that reflects the patterns across all of those interviews, rather than relying on a single anecdote. So it's sort of like an aggregate of all of those things, and then sort of averaging out everything that happens amongst them and all the answers that they get from them. Finally, they built a financial model that incorporates benefits, cost, flexibility, and risks, and validated everything through a rigorous review. The result is, a credible, risk-adjusted picture of Adobe Learning Manager's business impact, one that you can use with confidence when making the case for any type of learning investment. So let's break this down a little bit further here. A critical part of the study was the voice of the customer. So Forrester did go out and interview 5 global organizations, large enterprises, thousands of employees, and learners spread across multiple regions. The industries included hospitality, manufacturing, healthcare, financial services, and technology services. And the use cases spanned across employee training, customer education, partner enablement, all of those different things. Now, despite the diversity, the challenges were still consistent. Legacy systems were fragmented, inefficient, difficult to use. Organizations often had multiple LMS products in play, which created inconsistent learner experiences and high administrative overhead. But with Adobe Learning Manager, they were able to unify those into a single platform, like Hitesh was talking about. Customers highlighted easier content reuse, streamlined admin processes, and more intuitive learner experiences that were able to scale globally. And that's another important distinction, that most of these companies were in fact global organizations, meaning they had people all over the globe working for them, and that's very important distinction as well. So now, before we move forward, I do want to note a few important points about the study. First, this analysis was commissioned by Adobe, but connected independently by Forrester Consulting. Adobe did provide background information and helped identify the customers to be interviewed, but Forrester retained full editorial control and validated all of the findings that you're going to see today. And so also, while the financial model that we'll review is risk adjusted and conservative, Forrester emphasizes in their results that the results will vary from organization to organization, and that our learners, or our viewers in this case on this webinar, should use this framework to guide their own assumptions. So, when we start talking about hard numbers here in a little bit, you're going to hear some pretty big figures, millions of dollars here, hundreds of thousands of dollars here. And that's great. And we want you to see those numbers, but I also want you to understand the context of those numbers in terms of the percentage of improvement that goes along with them. And so Hitesh and I are kind of going to go back and forth on some of those to explain that a little bit better on what you could actually expect if something like that came to your region. Finally, I think it's important to point out that Forrester does not endorse Adobe or any vendor when they do these things. Their role here is simply to provide an objective, structured methodology that we are able to then take all the data they present to us and share it back with you. So that's just kind of a little disclaimer that we like to give at the very beginning of this before we move forward. So with that said, let's take a look at that composite organization that we talked about a little bit earlier. So to make the findings tangible, they had to build this composite organization based on all of those different interviews. And so here's kind of what that looks like. It's a global enterprise with $5 billion in annual revenue, a workforce of 20,000 employees worldwide, plus 20,000 customer learners and 10,000 partner learners. It's industry agnostic. It's designed to reflect the shared patterns across all of those multiple sectors we talked about before. And this composite model really provides a realistic basis for measuring both the cost and the benefits of implementing a product like Adobe Learning Manager. It's not hypothetical. It's representative of the kinds of global organizations that we see adopting our platform every single day. So hopefully this kind of explains that amalgamation of all of those things that we were talking about before. So this is the composite org that you'll hear us talk about throughout this presentation. Now let's move into the results that happened over the 3 years that this was measured. Forrester calculated 3 key metrics here. The first was ROI, and this is the big one. If you've seen us talk about this online, you've probably seen me post about it online. If you've seen me on LinkedIn, the ROI 337%. Net present value (NPV) $3.1 million. Total quantified benefits, $4 million. Now, I want to pause here for a second because I know MPV might be a new term or a term that's not really widely understood. So let's go ahead and, because ROI and benefits, they're very familiar, I think, but MPV can be kind of abstract when we talk about it. So let's talk about what is MPV for a second. The basic idea here is that NPV stands for net present value, and it answers a very simple question. Is this investment really worth it? Money today is worth more than the same amount that's going to be in the future. NPV adjusts future costs and benefits back into today's dollars. So when Forrester says ALM delivers 3.1 million in NPV, that means after factoring in all the costs, all the benefits, and all the time value of money, the investment still nets 3.1 million in today's terms. So think about it like this. Somebody gives you $100 today versus $100 3 years from now. The $100 today is more valuable. NPV does the math and makes this comparison fair and realistic. So let's go back here now and continue to go back to this. So putting it together.
Thanks, Justin, for explaining that, because I myself don't come from the finance background, so it took me a while to understand the difference in NPV and all, but thanks for simplifying it for us. And if I understand correctly, when we talk about the benefits and the NPV, we are talking about the gross versus net value that the study kind of led to. And these are some great figures and I think as we go deep into what are the factors that went into this particular study, I think it will give us more insight of what led to 337%. And that's over 3 years, I guess, right?
Yes, over 3 years, absolutely.
Over
Yep,
3 years.
and
Okay,
yep,
perfect.
and you're absolutely right on the gross versus net point as well. This was all I had to Google Scholar myself into realizing what some of these things meant, but now I understand, and hopefully everybody out there does as well, because it can be a little confusing. But yeah, absolutely, that's exactly right. So if we're putting this all together, we have 4 million in benefits against $925,000 in costs, which produced that net value of 3.1 million. So that's kind of like that gross versus net thing that Hitesh and I were just talking about, and an ROI of 337%. And maybe the most impressive number, organizations achieved that payback in under 6 months. So after that, every benefit went straight to the bottom line, which is a really good thing to keep in mind and consider as well. I always like these little quotes that they put on the sides of these slides as well. So these are anonymous quotes from different people from the industry in the interviews that were done throughout the study. But I think it's really interesting to read what they had to say. So saying here, the previous team had selected an LMS that was lackluster from the start. We received constant complaints about navigation and usability. I've heard that many times in my career. These issues had a direct impact on learner experience, which ultimately became the main reason for our switch to Adobe Learning Manager, as improving end user experience was a top priority. So even though the financial benefits are very tangible and very, I think, important to a lot of the people in the business unit, the people who are actually there, this is a manager of education and training within hospitality, the people who are on the front lines building the education, they understand that the learning experience, the intangible things maybe, are the things that also drive their decision to make the switch. And that's something we'll talk about in the unquantified benefits section of this study, but I really think that that's something that makes Adobe Learning Manager shine. I'm obviously pretty biased about it, but at the same time, I think that's ultimately, from a learning development professional perspective, that's what really sells it for us. So that's just something else that I love to call out. So I won't read all of these, but this is one of the ones that I really wanted to call out because I thought it was very well said. Let's go past here and go here. All right. So before we dive into those benefits, let's quickly review the costs that we were talking about before. So we have two main components here: internal deployment and maintenance, about $296 over 3 years, representing IT, LMS admin time. No third-party services were included here, just to be clear. Software licensing was about $629,000 over 3 years, covering 20,000 employees, 20,000 customers, and 10,000 partners. So that total is $925,000 in cost, which then sets the stage for that $4 million in benefits, the $3.1 million in terms of NPV. Right, when you're able to do the math on that. So just a little bit more of a breakdown on how we got to where we are. Total benefits, 4 million, total cost, 925K. And then of course the NPV, breaking it down to 3.1 million. And this is another, distinction as well. Like not everybody, your organization's mileage may vary. The size of your organization is obviously going to vary. So while these hard numbers may not be the exact same thing that you see, the percentages of improvement should be in line with what we say in this study as well. So I just want to make that very clear as we move forward. So here on the benefits slide, Forrester identified 6 different categories of impact. These range from productivity gains for admins and instructors, to hard savings from retiring legacy systems, to incremental value from partners and external courses. Altogether, these benefits added up to 4 million over 3 years. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here on this slide because I do want to break each one of these down in a little bit more detail. So let's go ahead and move forward here. But let's talk about first our productivity gains. So the largest single benefit area was productivity gains for administrators. The 3 key drivers behind this were simple course creation, upload content once, reuse it across multiple courses and learning paths; automatic propagation, update once, change the flows everywhere; reduction in help tickets; improved navigation, improvement in navigation and assignments, cut learner support tickets by about 60% in year 1. Together, these improvements saved 60% of administrative time in year 1, generating about $1.9 million. And they also saved about 60% reduction in help desk support tickets relating to learning and coursework in year one. And again, that equals out to about $1.9 million in savings, a 3-year risk-adjusted PV of the productivity gains from this streamlined course publishing, maintenance, and support upgrades that we see here. So, another great quote here is from this training manager in hospitality, which said that managing micro learning used to be a nightmare. Manual tracking, device management was a nightmare. Now it takes just a few clicks to build a course. Now, Hitesh, I want to pause here because you've been out in the field. You've seen this firsthand with customers. So maybe you might have an example or something we can talk about here to kind of even break this down even further.
Mhm. Absolutely, Justin. In fact, one example that instantly comes to my mind is from one of the organizations that Forrester worked with. And they happen to come from the financial services arm, and they are a big player in South Africa. And when we were doing an analysis with them, we figured out that they were able to increase the adoption of learning by over 10x right within first year of the deployment itself. Now,
Wow.
while we talk about simplifying the back-end administration activities, making things much more automated, these activity also lead to be more strategic in your approach with learning, right? Because you're spending more time on strategy versus the back-end stuff, which used to take several hours to kind of execute some simple workflow. So that not just resulted in 10x of adoption of learning because they were more strategic in their approach, they were making learning more personalized for the end users, but at the same time, they measured that the daily user visit, on the platform boosted from 50 a day to 750 a day, right? And
Wow.
right within that 1 year period. So we are not just talking about 10x of adoption, we are also talking about increase of people adopting the solution because number one, it is more open to kind of address their queries, right level of searchability, right level of content personalization based on people's role and function that organization was able to invest into. We saw a similar trend with the hospitality giant as well, the one you have referred to, because they also mentioned that, and that is based out of North America, a very large hospitality chain who uses the platform for their frontline employees, and they were able to notice 15% increment just in course enrollment and completion within the first year itself, right? So timely completion of content is very critical for an industry which is very compliance heavy, and hospitality is one of them because you are the face of the organization. You are dealing
Sure.
with the customers day in, day out. So you need to be timely compliant so that it can lead to better NPS, better, customer satisfaction score, and that all adds immense value for the organization.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think anytime you can make learning, you talked about it earlier. One of the terms you use that I really love every time I talk about anything like this is removing the friction. I think that's something that Adobe Learning Manager does very well, is it removes a lot of friction, both for the learner and for the administrator. And anytime you can make a learning platform sticky to the point where people want to come back to it, for a non-mandatory reason. That is the ultimate, for me at least, the ultimate goal, is I always wanted to make my learning experiences something that my learners wanted to come back to on their own because I had provided enough value to them for them to see it as a worthwhile thing to do during their workday or during their off time or whatever the case may be. If I was providing enough value, they would come back to that. And that ultimately, just kind of, it almost warmed my heart a little bit. I know that's kind of cheesy to say, but it's the truth. Like, you just don't think of it that way because most of the time in corporate learning, when you're in the trenches, you're used to just hearing how bad it is, how boring it is, all those kind of things. So anytime we can make it better, I feel like, we've made a huge win.
And I think needless to say, every single barrier removed in the experience of the end user lead to higher adoption. Now,
Yes.
Adobe makes organization think of to what extent you can remove these barriers. Is that barrier could be as simple as extra scrolling or redirection or change in experience or difficulty in searches, not getting the apt result when you're looking out for something. Every single barrier leads to higher dropout rates, lack of trust in the application by the end user. And if we are able to remove one at a time, we are leading to a more user-friendly and frictionless experience. I use the term a lot, for the end users, because
Mhm.
that definitely has an impact on what we are investing into.
Totally agree. All right, let's keep it moving here and let's talk about our second benefit, our second area of benefit. And this is for time saving and instructor administration. So before Adobe Learning Manager, instructors spent hours every week working on tasks like recording attendance, completing evaluation checklists, one learner at a time, and issuing certificates manually. I've lived this life. That is not a fun life. It is something that I had to do for 2.5 years when I worked at a big social media company. So I totally feel this pain. But Adobe Learning Manager helped digitize and centralize all of those processes. Attendance is tracked automatically. Evaluations can be bulk completed. Certificates can be generated instantly. And this reduced administrative time 60% in year one, worth nearly $1 million over 3 years. And as one manufacturing director put it, instead of hundreds of clicks per learner, we're down to 3 or 4 per learner. And again, Hitesh, I think this is another place where you've probably seen this, out in the field where these efficiencies like this are critical. So feel free to add any real world perspective that you might have here as well.
Absolutely. So, Justin, this whole idea of how we can make the administration and instructor activities, simplified, boost value, because now as we post-COVID scenario, organizations are back to inviting people back to office. We are, although still living in the hybrid world, but more and more reliance is that, okay, people should have more face-to-face interactions. They should realize the true value that the organization speaks about when they meet people, when they interact people. And we are seeing a huge uptick back in the classroom and the virtual session kind of, requirements. And the more simplification we can bring in for the management of those sessions, help in the productivity. In fact, I'm not just talking about instructors. Can we go ahead and make these sessions more flexible for the end users? So that if there is any last minute changes, can people themselves adapt to, the new schedule and, kind of put themselves in the new time and space wherein they are more comfortable, so that we can avoid these back and forth, the tickets and, the kind of, I would say delays that typically happen in terms of building those experiences. But there's one other question comes to my mind, Justin, which is for you. We have been talking about these percentages. We are talking about some good dollar value figures. Bases your experience on this study, what is the relevance of these numbers for organizations that are outside of North America? Because, how does that apply there? And, what are the factors that our audience should keep in mind? Because when they do some ROI analysis, internally based on these 6 factors, they may get some sort of better alignment to their geography, their region, their currencies, and in whatever dynamics they operate in. And
Sure.
just so you know, team, you can see the link on the session. There is a link to download the report, which you can click on. You can submit information and get the report handy so that you can do further analysis on these numbers. But Justin, any light on the relevance of these figures for the global audience will be very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think, we've touched upon it a little bit already, but I think, these hard numbers, I think they're very good to see and impressive in and of themselves. But I think the main thing you have to understand is the idea of what exactly we're talking about. So instructive administrative time, obviously that is going to be worth different values in different areas. It's going to be worth different values depending on what your workforce is, where you're based, what your pay rates are, and all of that kind of stuff. But the general idea is that because of the ways that we are able to alleviate some of these pain points, these friction points and things like that with the features and things that we're talking about inside of Adobe Learning Manager, taking things from hundreds of clicks down to 3 or 4, that's a serious amount of time saving. So it's the same amount of time savings, but it may not translate dollar to dollar based on where you are, but it should translate time to time where you are. And I think that's a very important distinction. And so I think that, that's something to consider, because while the number may not be as high or as impressive based on how where you are, what currency you're using, how many people are in your organization, and things like that, there is still going to be an impressive amount of time saved. And time saved is always something that people are going to care about. And at the end of the day, there will be a monetary piece associated with that, and you can put a hard number to it. And I think that's something also that learning and development professionals have struggled to do for many, many years, is tie tangible business outcomes to learning objectives, to learning programs. This here is a very direct, it's not tangential, it's very direct tie in for people to show, yes, we were able to implement this system, save 60% on the time spent doing these activities by these people. These people make X amount of money, and because of how much they make and how much time they save, this is the amount of money cumulatively we were able to save for our organization. So therefore, you could almost argue that this makes your department, net revenue positive in some ways. That was always a big thing for us. I was working at when I was working at a big company, we were the first initiative to be revenue positive because of the fact that we streamlined all of our processes and things like that so much that it outweighed the amount of money we were putting in to the learning and development programs that we were putting out there for thousands and thousands of advertisers at that time. So I think that's ultimately what I would take away from this is, yes, these hard, fast numbers, very cool, very impressive. But at the end of the day, it's how much time are you saving? How can you translate back to the people that you work with your currency in your environment? And how much money ultimately does that save your organization? That's an unknown, but the time savings is something that it should be pretty constant.
So Justin, I think what I got out of it is that although the NPV and the gross numbers may vary based on where you're based out of, what is your resource cost, what investment you're making into the initiative, but the ROI percentage that you highlighted, which is 37%, I think that remained constant, because over the 3 years, that ROI will actually lead to the real dollar value that the organization will end up saving or benefiting from, from the NPV perspective.
100%.
So the ROI percentage remain the same. The output from that ROI could be dependent on the resource cost and the input and the investment that goes based on your region and your currency, right?
Yep, definitely. So let's move on here to our cost savings. Cost savings from decommissioning legacy learning management software. So many organizations run multiple LMSs across multiple departments, each with its own licensing and support costs. By consolidating everything onto Adobe Learning Manager, they were able to retire a lot of those systems, saving about $528,000 over the course of those 3 years. So beyond the dollars, this also created a lot of consistency. Learners didn't have to juggle multiple logins. They didn't have to go through multiple interfaces. Training teams didn't have to work in silos anymore. Everything ran on a single unified platform. It was simpler for the learner, simpler for the author, simpler for the IT admins, simpler for everybody across the board, and it was far more scalable. So this is another one of those things that, yes, it has a hard dollar amount tied to it. But if you think about the idea of taking, and I'm not sure how many, we can talk about like how we did this at Adobe. I'm not sure how many systems we had at Adobe before we started moving a lot of things to Adobe Learning Manager, but I do know that it was a lot. And now we pretty much run, of almost everything, if not everything, off of Adobe Learning Manager. And everybody that I've talked to, because I've only been here for a year, full disclosure to everybody here, I'm still relatively new. So I've spent the last year really getting to know a lot of teams around Adobe. One of the things that I hear constantly is how happy people are that everything is in one place, that everything is easy to understand, that the interface is consistent across the board, all of those things. Now that automatically doesn't tell me like, oh, well, we're saving X amount of dollars per year, but it is a benefit. It is a tangible thing to hold on to, because all of the learner satisfaction scores and things like that that come out of something like this ultimately will lead to more efficient workforces and more efficiency gains down the pipeline, which will ultimately turn into some sort of savings for your company. And, this also, consolidating to one platform, of course, retiring all those systems and integrating into one. You're paying who knows what for all of those systems when you were doing that. You have tech debt out the wazoo. So you've got to employ a lot of developers that have to come fix things constantly and all that. A lot of that goes away because you've got a new modern system. Everything's in one place. Everybody can work on one thing at a time and really just consolidates it all. So I think this is another great point to hammer on. All right, let's move forward here if my mouse will cooperate. There we go. Okay. Coming down the home stretch, everybody. So we're going to talk about incremental partner-driven profits. So Forrester also identified revenue gains from improved partner training, better training experiences, easier access, clearer navigation, more targeted learning, improved partner performance, and satisfaction. So in fact, the NPS scores improved by about 3 points, and that directly translated into incremental revenue. A portion of that flowed back into the composite organization, totaling about $394,000 over the course of 3 years. And whoops, why did it go blank? There we go. Okay, back. One hospitality customer shared with us that a partner hotel's NPS went from 71 to 76, and they reduced negative feedback from guests, outcomes that they believed contributed to higher revenue for their hotel. So that's another thing, very tangible, very, you have it in your hand, easy to prove type of result. And this is the proof that learning isn't just a cost center. With Adobe Learning Manager, it can directly impact and drive business growth, especially in these industries of the service industries. We're talking hotels, restaurants, food, delivery, gig workers, all of those types of things. We can improve the overall customer experience by elevating the overall learner experience. And that is a wonderful, wonderful thing that we're able to do. All right, let's go to this. Here we go. And another area of value for Adobe Learning Manager is employee onboarding and offboarding. These are critical but often time-consuming processes. New hires need the right training assigned on day one. Departing employees need accounts deactivated, records archived. They need information about how to, get a hold of their benefits, get a hold of their tax forms, all that stuff the next time. ALM automates much of this, from role-based assignments to inactive user removal for specialized roles. It also streamlines assessments as well. So for the composite organization, these efficiencies netted out to being worth about $199,000 over 3 years. The dollar value is a little bit smaller here, but the strategic impact is pretty big. It's a faster ramp up time for your employees. So you go from zero to productive a lot faster than you did before. And then it's a lower compliance risk when employees leave. You're able to give them the information that they need on the way out in a respectful, easy to access way. It reduces the friction, which in a situation that's already full of friction on their way out. So these are both, very big, I wouldn't even say necessarily time-saving ways, but almost like morale-saving in terms of how they help your employee base, both with the onboarding. I know for a fact, when I got to Adobe, I made the comment to my boss after my first week. I said, this is the best onboarding program I've ever been through. And it's 100% true. And I've designed onboarding programs that I was extremely proud of. But Adobe's onboarding is so seamless and so easy and so, I think, compassionate in the way that it goes about doing it. And if more places put emphasis on that, I think, the amount of time it takes employees to go from, I would say, quote unquote, zero to hero is going to be lightning fast from here on out. So that's something also to consider there. Last thing here that we're going to talk about is additional profit generated from monetizing external online courses. This is not something that everybody does. This is I've done this at a couple of places that I've worked before, but organizations can use Adobe Learning Manager to generate new revenue by monetizing the content that they put out there for external courses. So we have integration with e-commerce and other e-commerce capabilities that you can package and sell training to external audiences. So for the composite organization, the big takeaway here was that this added up to about $113,000 in profit over 13 years. Not a huge amount of money, but also not nothing. Like, it's another way that learning is proving that, hey, we deserve a seat at the table because we are capable of driving or even creating revenue. One manufacturing customer told Forrester that their online training revenue nearly doubled after they adopted Adobe Learning Manager, and about 20% of that growth was directly tied to the improved learner experience the platform enabled. So this manufacturing company, obviously sells courses to probably partners or people who need to be certified on specific pieces of equipment and things like that. And they were able to increase the amount of money bringing in there, dramatically just by implementing Adobe Learning Manager. And they attributed that to the improved learner experience and the platform. So that's another, feather in the cap of Adobe Learning Manager to show that it's really good at removing those friction points. The learners then complete more courses, buy more courses, want to learn more even after they finished whatever it was they came for the first time, and that's ultimately, a really good thing. So this isn't just cost savings; it's a new revenue stream that's actually powered by learning.
And just in some of the trend to call out here is, whenever we talk about monetization of learning, I think it is the experience that decide whether you're going to have repeat buyers or not. So
Yes.
people come, they buy the content, they like it, fine. But if their experience wasn't great enough, the chances of them coming back on the platform and buying the content again kind of reduces. So that's where, again, the frictionless experience play a very critical role.
Totally agree. Doing a quick time check here. Okay, I need to move it along for my closing here. I want to highlight one interview from the study that points out the future of learning with Adobe Learning Manager. So a global technology services company described how they combine skill gap insights with AI-driven course recommendations. Again, two of my other favorite features inside of Adobe Learning Manager, especially AI-driven course recommendations. For new hires, that meant the right learning plans were in place from day one. For managers, it meant clear visibility into the skill gaps at the team or role level. And they were able to report a 25% reduction in onboarding time for new employees. And more importantly, they expect this approach to drive long-term outcomes as well. Higher productivity, faster internal mobility, stronger business results. That's something I was talking about a little bit earlier. Like, if you can improve the learner experience, you will get a more efficient workforce. Those efficiencies will trickle down into other areas and thus save you more money, make you more money, etc. So, Hitesh, I know you've worked on several implementations with Adobe Learning Manager and things like that. So in terms of, where role-based plans and AI recommendations made a big impact, you have any quick example to share about somebody who's really done something with those?
Yes, when we speak to our customers, we deal with two kind of audience. One wherein they really want to simplify, shorten the onboarding process of the employees so that they become productive as soon as possible. And that's where the personalized role-based learning path and tracks play a very significant role. And the one that could be automated in a way that it doesn't require any manual intervention. So as people get onboarded in the organization, how they can put into the right track automatically. And the other side is where organizations are not focusing on cutting down the onboarding time, but making it more effective, because they cannot cut down time. They have to stick with that time period. So in that as well, how does the automation and this personalized, you emphasize on the word personalization a lot, and that plays a very critical role there as well.
Totally agree. Thank you so much. So let's wrap this up with some unquantified benefits beyond those quantified results that Forrester identified. Several benefits that didn't make it into that financial model, but are hugely important, that our customers have called out: the enhanced user experience, fewer complaints, higher engagement, improved compliance reporting. Managers easily track who's completed what and are able to take action more quickly. Scalability, the ability to add new audiences or expand globally without adding more platforms. Personalization, we just talked about it, driving AI recommendations to keep learning aligned with business needs. One customer told us that ALM's reporting was the single biggest factor in meeting his compliance requirements on time. So while the 337% ROI and 3.1 million NPV are really impressive, they are actually an understatement. The true business impact, once these unquantified benefits are factored in, is immense. So I think this is where we'll stop here. And oh, I believe my timer's going off, telling me that, Justin, you need to be quiet. How do I stop that? There we go. Okay, there it is. All right, so that pretty much wraps it up for this, but I want to close with this slide right here just to reiterate again that the ROI is 337%, benefits 4 million, NPV 3.1 million, and again, that payback happening in under 6 months. So with that, we have probably about a minute or two that we can take some questions. I see some questions have already been answered. Hitesh, any questions that maybe we want to bring up, or if anybody has anything else, they can put it in the chat.
I think one question that was brought up by Jose is that around the unquantifiable, factors to measure the ROI, which I think you covered in the last slide. And there are several factors. One is how we are making, the employees to skill better, how we are able to meet the learning objectives, the reporting analysis, what keeps us ahead in the compliance status. Are we able to increase engagement with the users, which I think Krishna mentioned in a reply, the social community or interaction factors that Adobe kind of offers. So there are several ways, but Jose will be happy to connect with you, so that I can understand the use case better, and I can work with the team to get back to you with more, realistic examples that align to your business and the use case.
Fantastic. All right. Well, everybody, please also don't forget, download the report. It's down there in the bottom right-hand corner of the Adobe Connect window. If you can't see that, it's probably right down by where my face is, I think, according to what my window looks like. So go ahead and download that. It's on the other side. Okay, it's on the other side. It's over that way. So just grab that, and thank you so much for joining us here today. We really do appreciate it. You can always reach out to us if you need anything else. Ask us additional questions. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. Hitesh is easy to find as well. Just copy our names, put us in there, and come find us and ask us anything you want. And we look forward to seeing you again here on a presentation again in the very near future, hopefully. So thanks, everybody. Thank you, Hitesh, and we really appreciate it. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Justin. Now go to bed. Thanks a lot. Take care.